Good day, everyone. Welcome back to the Doc of Detox show. I'm Dr. Darrell Wolfe, and today's show is Let Food Be Thy Medicine with Brian and Anna Clement. So before we start, I just want to say that I've known Dr. Clement and known of him for at least 35 years, and I can tell you right now that his beliefs are truly steeped in nature's rules, nature's laws. And you know what? It's very difficult to actually find a practitioner that will hold the line. And what we need to do is find practitioners that hold the line, that are in line with nature, that do not compromise, because this is the only way that we're truly going to find great health. So before we begin, I would like to talk about the Legends of Health conference. This conference has been moved to an online webinar. So that means we're going to share it with the whole world, all because of COVID-19. So you know what? There's always a silver lining. There's always a silver lining. So now that it's online, all of my viewers will be able to join to learn more about this conference and to see me deliver 4 of my life-changing, life-saving presentations. Visit our events page on docofdetox.com. Now, when you go there, you'll be able to get your tickets discounted at $97. But you're not just going to hear about my lectures. There's going to be 12 world-leading lecturers lecturing and giving you the most valuable, life-saving, life-changing information, along with Dr. Brian Clement, okay, and Anna. All right, so let's talk about my lectures, and then we'll talk about Dr. Clement's. My first lecture is Mind Over Medicine, May 1st, from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. My second lecture is How to Thrive and Stay Alive on Planet Earth, May 2nd, from 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. My third lecture is All Disease is an Inflammation Scar Tissue Issue, May the 7th, from 9 p.m. until 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And my fourth lecture is Creating the Perfect Day for the Perfect You, May the 9th, from 11 a.m. to 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. Dr. Brian Clement and Anna will be lecturing Let Food Be Thy Medicine, May the 2nd, from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and Increasing Vitality for Healthy Couples on May the 2nd from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Last but not least, Quantum Human Biology, May the 9th, from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So understand something, everyone. These $97 tickets are limited, so make sure that you check out my website by going to the events page, okay? Go to docofdetox.com. So let's begin the show. Dr. Brian Clement has spearheaded the international progressive health movement for more than 3.5 decades. He is the director of the renowned Hippocrates Health Institute in West Palm Beach, Florida. For more than 40 years, Anna Maria Clement has been an international leader in the progressive health movement. Prior to coming to the United States to join Hippocrates, she was the director of Sweden's Brandel Health Center in Stockholm. Good day, Brian and Anna. How are you doing?
Very, very well. How about you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Before we go and get into a bunch of questions that I've got for you guys, how's everybody doing down there with the situation we're going through with the COVID-19? How are you doing?
The Institute is a little refuge unto itself. And of course, we've been using the latest technologies where we have vaporizers going in the air that put probiotics evenly throughout rooms. And those probiotics literally eat microbes up. So not only can you breathe these in, they're healthy for you, but they're also going to kill the bad guys that are not healthy for you. And of course, we have a small group here now. Many of our guests are actually right here now because they can't go back to Europe, they can't go back to other parts of Canada and the United States, so we're having a more intimate group than we usually have at this point.
It's a great place to get stuck in.
Exactly.
Really, get to know your patients. Isn't that the key?
Anna and I were mentioning it's like the old days, 50 years ago when we started. This is my 50th anniversary in 2020, and Anna Maria's 47th. anniversary. So
Yeah.
I said, what I really miss is that level of intimacy. Now we have large groups, and as you know, we're traveling 200 days a year throughout the world, and that's all slowing down. And maybe it's a silver lining, and it gets us all to reflect on what our values are and the core desires and fulfilling things that we should all pursue.
Absolutely. I've definitely taken a look at the way I'm doing business and helping people. And we've made a lot of changes just even in the last few days. And I think the biggest thing that we need to understand is we need to be able to adapt. We need to be able to respond appropriately no matter what is going on, whether things are going our way or whether there's chaos. The way you respond is going to show you what your emotional integrity, where it stands. And I think, if nothing else, this is really going to show a lot of people whether or not they are emotionally stable or not. Because when things are going your way, it's not hard to have a smile. But when things aren't going your way and you're in uncharted territory and you still stay connected to your breath and you've got a slight smile on your face, then you know that you are the master of your mind and your body. What do you think of that?
Speaking our language here, we think that what's lacking in our cultures worldwide now is true values. People are just happy enough to survive. They don't even understand the word thrive. They don't understand the responsibility we have to not only gain, but to give, to contribute. That's why all of us are on this planet. So I'm with you. I think that this is a time to not only reevaluate, but really determine how we're going to recreate our reality and make sure that our number one motivation always is to live with passion. If we're not living with passion, no wonder people are sick. Everyone that comes through the Hippocrates program gets psychotherapy for this very reason. If one doesn't find themselves, there's no self to love, respect, and to heal.
Absolutely. And you know what, Brian? It's like this. You just said it right there. It's about self-respect, self-love, self-care. And the reality is, this is not wishful thinking. This is somewhere we have to go. But to get the majority of the population to realize that they have been programmed and they've been programmed all their life and that they have to become their own programmer. And to do that, that means that you have to start really just observing and not judging yourself, but really getting inside and observing and going, that's not the authentic me. That's not me. Get rid of this. It's like anything else. I mean, you know about gardens and you know about eating right, but what about the garden of your mind? And I know that at Hippocrates, you really focus on going in there and really weeding out what isn't supposed to be there so people find their authentic self. Am I right?
Not only are you right, they had the original 10 commandments. We should be writing the second 10 commandments, which should be put above everything else. If thou does not find thyself, thou hast no self to give. Thou hast no self to discover. Thou hast no self to enjoy. And so this struggle we have is all a lack of imagination. I think lack of imagination is the number one killer for the human race. And right now, all of us are given an opportunity to see how bizarre and how strange everything is. Just today I was reading that the data from the worldwide coronavirus is 2 million people have contracted it. That's not a lot of people. We have about 9 billion people on the earth. When this fiasco began and they were rolling it out, I went and I looked at the data on common colds and flus globally. Every single year, globally, 3 million people die of the common cold and flu, influenza. And we are now focusing on this. Not to say this isn't serious, not to say that it either skipped species, which I doubt, or it was bioengineered, this triune virus that has a window from HIV and an RNA window from HIV, SARS virus, and the common cold, because it does something unique. Just yesterday, I did a presentation that explained the pathology of it and what we now have as an international consensus from the real doctors on the front line, not the ones who are in laboratories trying to figure out how to make a vaccine that's only going to hurt you and not help you. And they all pretty much say that it's taking the hem, which is the hemoglobin, oxygen out, so that when it goes into the lung and is supposed to go into the sac and fill that sac with oxygen, there's none there. It's spilled through the body. So now the consensus is about 7 out of 10 people that are placed on the respirators are going to perish. They're going to die because the respirators seemingly are not working, because when you take oxygen in, even through the respiration technology, you have to make it go through the process. And if when the oxygen comes in to the hemoglobin, it's taken out immediately by the 19, then it's not going to enter back into the tubulars of the lungs. So this is why it's a deadly virus. But on the other hand, this is embellished like I've never seen anything embellished in my life. And the powers that be, we were just reading yesterday that only 10 billionaires, listen closely, only 10 billionaires in the last 6 days have made $5 billion. So they crash the economy like they did in 2008. They make the stocks go from $10 to $1. The rest of us are scrambling, hoping we can feed our family. And then they invest in the $1 stock that now has gone up to $7. And so this is a routine. We went in the last 25 years here in the United States and somewhat in Canada, the developed world as we call it, from 20% of the population holding the money to 1%. And Ann and I have been joking and saying it's going to probably be a fraction of 1% if they keep this up. So this is a scheme. And if you see it as a scheme, if you can raise yourself above it and not get caught up in the fear factor, as I call it, the reptilian fear factor, you're going to be able to not only endure this, but learn to say the most important word you've ever said: no, I'm not going to participate in this.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brian. And you know what? If I can go back just a little bit, and you said imagination is the greatest thing. And you know what? That's been stolen from us. And the reality is that, boy, just think if we used our imagination like this 1% of 1% of the population, boy, didn't we get screwed and tattooed on this one. And you know what? So understand, everyone, if you don't want to bring back the most precious gift you've ever been given by your creator, which is your imagination, because we see an image before we have a thought. And if you don't have a good image, you're not going to have a good thought. And if you don't have a good thought, then you're not going to have a good emotion. If you're not going to have a good emotion, which is energy in motion, you're not going to have a good frequency. And if you don't have that, you're not going to have good chemicals that are dumping in your body. You're going to be dumping the chemicals you're dumping right now, which is called HAC, which is a histamine, adrenaline, and cortisol, and it's burning you up. So if you don't want to get your imagination and start rewriting your story, okay, then it's going to be a horror story. And I want to say one other thing, and I think you probably feel the same way. So GPS is the greatest gift. I mean, imagination is our GPS for creating the life we've always been promised or promised ourselves. And pain is our friend. And pain has been made an enemy. And that's why it's so easy to be abused today, because pain is in our daily diet. What do you think, Brian?
Well, you bet it is. I mean, think about what people are consuming. The pain that the animal go through when we're slaughtering an animal to eat it. And that adrenaline actually gives information to your own body. I was just discussing data yesterday. In countries that consume the largest amount of animal-based foods, they're the highest murder and the highest rape in these countries. So that's painful. It's painful if you always feel that you lack something, that you're not being nourished, either in your soul or in your body. And that lack becomes a message, almost a mantra for your own destiny. You're going to reduce your potentiality if you come from lack. And prosperity comes from being highly nourished, highly fulfilled, highly imaginative, and most important, recognize everything's perfectly fine. It's very difficult at times like this because we get back to the reptilian brain. Remember, you have the 3-layer brain, and it was 2 to 3 million years where the first brain came, and that was for a very good reason. It was for reproduction, which is a good thing, and also fight and flight. And what has happened is we've all imploded now globally, the entire world. This is the first time in human history. Listen to what I'm saying. The first time in human history, it's unanimous. Little islands in the middle of the South Pacific, northern parts near the Antarctic. Everyone's affected by this. And we've gone back into the cave. We feel we're being assaulted at this point. And we're not using the limbic brain, which is the most important for empathy and compassion. And when we say empathy and compassion, you always think for others. But if you don't have empathy and compassion for yourself, and you do the right things, you make the right choices, you live with values, you're willing to die for what you believe in, you can't have that for other people in any significant way. And most important, the neocortex, when we raise ourselves above and we understand foresight. I know what's going to happen if I act this way. Hindsight. I know I've done that 25 times. I'm not going to do it the 26th. And most important, insight. And insight is extrasensory perception. And if we could live with insight, can you imagine all of this would be humorous rather than frightening for us?
Absolutely. So what we need to understand is we've got to take it back one way or the other. And I think that, how much do you value yourself? How much do you value freedom? How much do you value peace of mind? And I think that, when we have no value, and that's what we're doing right now, is we're showing it. But what I'd like to ask you is this. Can I ask you why you called your institute the name that you did?
Well, I can't take credit for that. Our founder was Anne Wigmore, a Lithuanian peasant who immigrated to the United States and was a very sickly girl, and her luck didn't change when she arrived. She mangled her legs in a horse and carriage accident, and we're talking in the 1930s, and the doctors at Harvard, she was in Boston, said, we're going to cut your legs off, but we don't have the time to do it now because she obviously wasn't insured. So they said in 2 weeks, come back, and her legs were getting gangrene, and her parents put her on a park bench as they worked across from the bakery where they had their business. And she had the instinct from watching her grandmom back in Lithuania, the village doctor. And remember, all doctors a century ago and before were naturopathic doctors. They weren't writing prescriptions and sending you to the pharmacy. And she put her little hand underneath the park bench and pulled grass out and had the instinct to chew it and put it on the wound, and she healed herself. But like the rest of us, started to live it up, live the Western diet, got herself darn good and sick. Now she's 50, and she goes up to see the doctors again, and the doctors say, you're going to die. You have stage 4 cancer. There's nothing we can do. You'll be dead in 3 months. Go home and get your affairs in order. So she went home, got angry, and said, no, I'm going to live the way I did as a little girl on plants and herbs and change my whole outlook and stop the merry-go-round of nonsense that we call fun, and healed herself and opened the doors of Hippocrates when I was a little boy in 1956. And when I asked her, when I joined the team in 1975, why do you call this Hippocrates? It's a very hard word for people to say. Most people don't have the knowledge of who that is. And she said, it's to give respect for the man that was the most powerful doctor in the history of the West. His first and foremost statement was, let food be thy medicine, medicine be thy food. How dare mainstream allopathic physicians and their pharmaceutical funders stand up every June and take the Hippocrates Oath and go out and not even know about food, not even use herbs and denigrate them, not even talk about the things Hippocrates did. Hippocrates was the man who basically created hydrotherapy. They didn't have fancy jacuzzis and saunas in those days. They would actually hold two strong men would hold people and let the waves come in and out, or put them in a river and let their bodies be rhythmically in tune with the water, so it gets the bloodstream to work like the river did. And he was using a form of acupuncture. Ann and I had the privilege 2 years ago, we were keynote speakers in Athens, and it was one of those great times where we were the stars supposedly, but there were better stars than us there. So we had an opportunity to sit for 3 days and listen to colleagues from medicine, and one was not only a physician, but also an authority on Hippocrates. And since then, we've written a lot about him and read several books, and Anna Maria has just done a virtual interview in the upcoming magazine, the Hippocrates magazine. So Anna's funny. She gets steeped into these people, gets into their heads, and then does these virtual interviews. And she did one with Hahnemann years ago. So for about a year, we got into Hahnemann. Now we're into Hippocrates. And so Anne chose the right name. And she's lived up to the spirit and the power and the insight and the wisdom of the father of Western medicine. Let's not forget there were other medicines before Hippocrates. The Africans had it 9,000 years ago. The Asians had it. But we in our Western white arrogance always say the father of medicine. No, the father of Western medicine. And so we're happy she chose that name.
That's wonderful. So, and what do you think about the do no harm?
That's the most ironic part of this story.
Yes.
In Canada, in England, in France, in Germany, in the United States, the third killer is medical error, medical mistakes. The only thing that beats the mistakes the pharmaceutical and their allied doctors do is cancer and heart disease. Number 3 is watch out for the harm that's going to be done. Our entire life, since we were kids in our 20s, we've been helping to clean up the messes, and Hippocrates must be rolling in his grave with this.
Absolutely. But you know what? Somebody actually asked me that the other day, and I said, well, yeah, they are number 3, but actually we'll give them number 1 because they're helping the cause. They're the biggest cause of number 1 and number 2. So, you know, they take the cake. And I say that not to put them down because, you know, medicine does have its place, but it should only should be 1% of health. The other 99% should be self-care and self-love. And there is no care and there is no love when you go to the 1%. So then you become a 911 emergency, and things have to change. And that's another part of the reason that we're here today, because we have put this whole crisis in the hands of the medical system. And that's why everybody is so terrified and traumatized right now. What do you think, Brian?
Well, to give an example how bizarre this gets, I was recently told, and then I read, that the Canadian Diabetic Association came out a few days ago and literally stated this. I would be so ashamed to be this ignorant, that food has nothing to do with strengthening your immune system. This is the work these people were trained and educated to do, and they're basically denying what they were trained. Now, how could anyone be that out of touch with reality? Well, they are funded by the pharmaceutical industry. These are the people that put Jell-O into your diet at hospitals. These are the people that say fried chicken is a great option for protein. And so it shouldn't be surprising, although it is surprising to me, that somebody would have that level of total, absolute disconnect to literally say food has nothing to do with the immune system. What I'd suggest for those people in that entire organization is all of them not eat for about the next 4 months and tell me if food has anything to do with your health. And it's just bizarre to me sometimes how off and out of touch these people are.
So now we're back to programming. So everybody's getting programmed, and that's where we are today. So wouldn't it be great if there was a switch that we could stop the programming that's coming down from the elite and then dribbling down into the government and then dribbling into the medical system, into the food industry, and into everything else? And then it just comes seeping in like sewage into our homes, into our hearts, into our brains. I don't know. Somewhere, I don't know what that switch is, but you know what? It's got to be a very powerful switch to get everyone to snap back to reality. So, talking about food, why don't you tell me about the foods that are the most effective in medicine?
Well, of course, we've been blessed here at Hippocrates because when I was just a young guy in my 30s, I started to realize that all of the biology I studied and the chemistry I studied and the physics I studied, and then further quantum physics and quantum biology and most important, natural history, were compartmentalized, that nobody spoke to one another. And I distilled it down to realize it's all the same science. It's just different windows looking at life as we know it. All life on the planet, all life in the multiple universes, all life within your human cells, etc. And so from that, it is very simple for us to conclude that every drop of life on this planet, the planet Earth, comes from the sun. Now, this is 101 science. This is what anyone would learn if you were sitting in your first year of university in physics. So from the sun, which is a star, very hot star, we have photons that pour down on the Earth. You look out your window during the day, you're going to see those photons. It's called sun rays and sunlights. Now, where they originate from is really interesting. In the center of the sun, this second, and that second, and the next second, endless zillions, we don't even have a number, endless zillions of protons are born, and they start bouncing back and forth on neutrons, and that creates friction, heat. And the center of the sun is 15 million degrees. Let me repeat this to you. So where this is happening, this fusion is happening, is 15 million degrees. It bounces back and forth for 100,000 years. And that friction gets hotter and hotter. When it gets to the surface, about 6,000 to 7,000 degrees, and it shoots off with the solar storm so rapidly that it becomes light. So it comes from a proton to a photon. Now, what evolved on the planet Earth to capture all life is green leafy plants. So let's stop there and revisit something that nobody seems to visit, called common sense. So if every drop of life on the planet comes from the sun, and the vehicle is protons that move fast and become light and photons, and you're captured on a green leafy plant, what do you think humans should be eating? So knowing this, back 64 years ago, Hippocrates focused it on green leafy plants. The second question we had is, how, when you live in Canada, in the middle of winter, are you going to get a green leafy plant? So that was a pretty simple discovery. That was called a sprout. Now, we didn't know in those days what we know about sprouts today. And we're going to give you that science, which is a tsunami of unbelievable evidence. Those sprouts contain the highest medicines that humans have ever discovered in the history of all science, everywhere, always. And they're called phytonutrients, phytochemicals. Humans only discovered those at the first time in 1948. Didn't do any work on it until the 1980s, and didn't get serious about it till the 1990s. Now, for those of you listening that are a little worried about your money at this point, every 1 pound of seed comes to become 10 pounds of food. The highest protein food, the highest essential fat foods, the highest vitamin food, the highest mineral food, and most important, the highest hormones, highest oxygen, highest phytochemicals, and highest enzyme food. So let's stop at the phytochemicals. When they found at Johns Hopkins that the cabbage family was the #1 way to kill and destroy and prevent cancer, they found out broccoli was the most powerful of all. Somebody who was a graduate student wisely said, if broccoli works, let's test the sprout of broccoli. And they found out it was 50 times stronger to fight and reverse cancer than broccoli itself. Now, Ann Wigmore didn't know this in 1956. Now I write books on this subject. Now they're scientists at the Linus Pauling Institute, top scientists in the world. This is all they do. And what they discovered is if you cook a sprout or if you cook a food, you neuter all these nutrients. And most important, you neuter the hormones, oxygen, phytochemicals, and enzymes. The other little message that Ann and I want to give you is that every single species on Earth, we have about 8 to 9 million species we've identified. We now estimate that 67 species a day are dying without us identifying them. The current rate of death, we have more species dying now than ever in the history of the planet Earth. But we know about 8 to 9 million species. 100% of those species in nature eat a raw food diet. The only species that choose not to eat raw food is the human species. Now we have a group of intellectual academics who obviously have no common sense called anthropologists. And the anthropologists tell us something that's biologically impossible. That when humans start to eat cooked food, our brains grew. Now let me blow this out of the water. It's literally, virtually, and biochemically impossible. If I take a seed and I cook it, and now it's April and I'm in Canada, and I want to put peas in the ground, so by May I get peas, but I put a cooked pea seed in the ground, how long am I going to wait for the pea to grow? Well, how long are you going to wait for the brain to grow? Obviously, the anthropologist's brains haven't grown enough to realize dead things don't make biology grow. They make things shrink. So we have chosen the plant-based, the organic, and the core, the germinated foods, and the other foods that are having the highest level of photons in it. Algae, both freshwater algae, saltwater algae, edible weeds, which are free, by the way, all over the world. And we don't have a theory of philosophy, and I'm not just writing books and doing internet, articles. We have done clinical research on hundreds of thousands of people for the last 64 years. Between us, Anna Marie and I have 97 years of work we've done. In great part in Europe. I've done a little in Europe. I ran centers for 3.5 years. And here at Hippocrates. Who has come to Hippocrates since 1956? The smartest people and the sickest people in the world. So after mainstream medicine fails, people get on planes from every corner of the globe, and they arrive here. We put them on a lifestyle. We created lifestyle medicine here. And we observe our medical team through blood tests and scanning, observe what happens. And as you know, Dr. Wolfe, we've had thousands of people over the years tell us, lo and behold, like Ann Wigmore, my cancer's not here. Things like type 2 diabetes are so quick to go away, it's shocking, because it's not a disease. Heart disease, 97% is not a disease, it's a lifestyle choice. MS, Parkinson's disease. And others can say, give me the evidence. The best evidence is living people. That's the best evidence in the world. They want to play the money game. Show me millions of dollars of research, and my little closed mind may open up. Not really, but may open up. How about common sense? How about observing humanity? How about using the neocortex and using the limbic brain and having empathy and having compassion? And don't forget the oath you took. Do no harm. So what we do is the opposite of harm here. It's support and love people so that they heal themselves. The old BS story is, pay me, I make you well. Lie. Pay me, I teach you, I support you, I love you. You're the only one that can make you well.
Yeah. When we finally realize that we can't continually go from treatment to treatment because eventually you're going to get mistreated, that we need to find someone that's going to train us, train our brain, to master our brain, to master our body, to just master the moment, so that each moment we master turns into a day that we repeat every day to create that perfect day, to create that healthy body. And there's nothing more than that anybody wants. Everybody wants this, but you hit it on the head, Brian. It's those gentle baby steps and coming back to common sense and understand something, that we must turn our back on what we call the scientific breakthrough. Not completely, but if we want to completely find our authentic self and live that life that people talk about and say that anybody can have it, well, you can't have it until you switch off the old program. So I'd like to ask you about a couple of books that you have written, like The 7 Keys to Lifelong Sexual Vitality, and the second one being Menopause. Why don't you tell our audience just about these two books and why you wrote them and what they're about?
Both of these books, Anna Marie and I co-authored. The one that is the oldest is 7 Ways to Lifelong Sexual Vitality. And just this week, I gave that course here to the guests that are on campus. And I was explaining that I was provoked to write that because of the religious upbringing I had. When I was a boy, they told me that sex was dirty, that sex was bad, that you were a bad person if you desired sex. So that's why I was interested in it. Once they told me it was bad, I said, well, gee, there has to be some fun. I was told, for instance, when I was a child, that murder was bad, but homosexuals were bad, and women were bad. And I noticed when I was 14, it was a very young age, I had a revelation that if I told somebody, my friends, my boy friends, that, by the way, I had sex with a girl, I would be a hero. But if a girl was saying she had sex, she would be a whore. And I knew there was a problem with that. There was a real problem with that. So after learning biology and natural laws and history and energetic medicine, we're the only institute in the world that have a full blast energy medicine department here. I recognize that the strongest energy that we have is the sex hormone energy in our body. And it's not only about having sex, all your motivation, all your ambition, the way you dress, the way you comb your hair, the way you hold yourself, your persona, until the day you die, has to do with sex hormones. How could this be bad? And how could the most loving, intimate act I've ever had with my wife, who I love, she's my best friend, she's the mother of my children, be a bad and dirty thing? So we wrote the book, and we explained the science of it and how, by the way, your health will flourish if you have a healthy, committed relationship, that you'll live longer with a healthy, committed relationship, that, by the way, it's pleasurable to have intimacy, it's not painful, it's not bad, and if it is, you've got to do some personal work on yourself, and you will attract exactly who you are to you. So when people have a series of bad relationships, I can assure you they haven't done the work on themselves. I don't know how many times I've sat in my office, hundreds it must be, where people said, I don't know what's wrong. I've been married to a guy called Joe 3 times. And every time I meet this guy, Joe, and I fall in love and I get married, that Joe hits me with this particular fist right here. And my answer or my question to them always is, do you think you participate? They say, bad luck. No, you attract to what you are. So when you raise your self-realization, your values, and you only permit choices of integrity into your life, that's who you'll attract. Not a better person, not a more enlightened person, a person who's not struggling You don't want two people that are struggling to have babies. Then they have babies who struggle. Most of your problems that all of you are perceiving are bad things that you don't know how to control came from you observing the very sick relationship between your mother and father. So your health depends upon intimacy. Your health depends upon you making these choices that are going to enrich you, fulfill you, and, by the way, bond you even more than if you don't have intimacy. And the second book that Anna Marie and I wrote this year, it's always fun. We spend 2 to 3, maybe sometimes 4 years reading the research and getting deep into the science. We started to realize that men have menopause not at 50, but starting at 26. Now, why I wrote that book with Anna is we realized that doctors don't know that. That the lay people, it was 1 out of 32 people we asked, knew that men start menopause at 26. We sexually peak at 19. At 19, we're terrorists. When I used to see trees that were bent over, I used to stop the car to see the tree. I mean, because you're raging with hormones. So you're so productive sexually at 19. By the time you're 25, you're over the peak, and overnight, you fall off a cliff. And human growth hormones stop being produced in any significant way, that your testosterone starts to drop slowly but surely, and the list goes on. And what occurs is by the time the average Canadian or American is 40 years old, listen to this, 40 years old, 50% cannot sexually perform now. It used to take 2 generations ago until you were 75 for that to happen. By the time the average North American and Western European man is 50, 71% of them cannot sexually perform. So Viagra went through the ceiling on this one. And then what happened is the number one user group of Viagra we write about happens to be 20 to 28-year-old boys. They're using it as a recreational drug. I don't want to sound like I'm bragging, but if I did then, it would have fallen off. You certainly at 20 to 28 should not need Viagra. And if you do, there's something seriously wrong. Now, of course, diet and chemicals in your diet and negative attitude and all of these things, your clothing is right up at the top of the list. One of the many books we've written is Killer Clothes. We tell you that if you're not wearing natural fibers like we do in organic undergarments and organic clothing like Anna is, basically you're putting estrogens into your body. It feminizes men and masculates women. These are not opinions we have. These are scientifically validated facts we're giving you now. And so the other thing we learn is that if you don't maintain muscle throughout your life, your hormones are going to go south. That's not only a message for men, but for women. And what's really interesting, you and I are attracted to a woman with a physique that's muscular. Women are attracted to us if we have muscular. There's a reason for that, because genetics play a role there. The woman sees a man that looks like that and says, oh, without even knowing it, he would be a good mate for me to make children, even if she's menopausal and over that time. We look at a woman in the same way. We're attracted to sexy, healthy, vibrant bodies. And we teach you the very practical ways to use these tools to enrich your life. For instance, for men, even my testosterone is probably 1/3 of it would be at 69 years old than it was at 20 years old. What do? You take ginseng. And the one that's proven statistically to be the highest and best is red ginseng. So there's a little tip we can give you in that one. But there's so many. Women go to cola.
Excellent information. And you know what? We all kind of seem to go down the same path in a bit, but I've kind of went a different way. Like I have a course that's called Wolfe Non-Surgical that really deals with displaced calcium crystallization, scar tissue formation. And, we put a course together quite a while ago that's called Pelvic Floor Restoration, where we actually teach practitioners how to bring the pelvic floor back and the whole pelvis, right from the large intestine right down and bring the whole pelvis back. Because if you don't bring that, you don't have any kind of life. And, we teach this to the practitioners that even if there's another problem somewhere else in the body, You have to focus on that root chakra, that pelvic area, that large intestine, and you bring that back, and that brings back the life force, then everything else comes back. So, you know what, everybody out there, I would really highly suggest that you get these books and you read these books, because I got to tell you that Brian and Anna, you guys are intelligent, and you make common sense. So we need common sense health, everyone. And if we don't start going that direction, and the other thing is you know what, the BS that is out there in the medical system, that's out there in the food industry, you're not going to find it. You're going to find it on shows like this. You're going to find it from people like Brian and Anna, and you're not going to find it out there in mainstream. In mainstream, you're going to get yourself in trouble, and you might just find yourself going off a cliff. And, you know, this is not about money. This is about family. Whether anybody wants to believe this or not, I know they believe the same as I do, and that we are all family. We came here as spirit beings. We're going to leave as spirit beings. And you know what? There's a small sector that control the whole planet, and everything's a damn lie. It's just a lie. Everything's a lie, and everything is twisted. And if it wasn't for the grace of God in your spirit, we wouldn't even exist on this planet. So when you learn how to feed the spirit, you're going to heal your body. Now, Brian, if you don't mind, I'd like to move on to you. Why do you think more than half of married couples get divorced? Okay. And this is something you said, and only 10% feel they have strong, loving relationships. And I know you're right. I just want you to explain it, please.
I go back to what we said earlier, that we have a really odd and perverted image of what relationships are from your parents. Give an example. Anna Marie and I were both blessed, and we're who we are as men and women because we had at least parents who loved each other and loved us as children. But even they were broken. Even they were neurotic. Even they mistreated themselves in ways that we struggled not to do. And so imagine if you have parents that the husband's abusive and the woman is submissive. And so the message the woman gets or the girl gets is you have to be submissive to a man. A man gets to be in control of the family. I've got to be beat up emotionally or physically. So we are play acting bad plays. These are black comedies that are not so funny. And when we start to look at our personalities between the time you're conceived and you're 6 years old, listen closely, 85% of your personalities develop. 6 years old, not 60 years old. And so a lot of us have to work really hard to first understand we have this patterns of deception and lack authenticity, the word that I use and you use. But then we have to do the work. We've got to create good images. We've got to fight our instinct to be abusive to ourselves and to our mates, to our loved ones. So that's why 90% do not have happy marriages, and only 10% consider happy, and 50% break up, you know. And we have such a social abnormality with this. Women have been in a position where they're afraid to leave abusive relationships. There's more abuse going on right now as people are locked into their house than ever in history. That they're getting more 911 calls all over the world because the husband is badgering and beating emotionally or physically the wife and the children. They are play acting what they saw in their own household. And that's why we have to change this. This is why everyone needs to look at and reflect who they are and have the courage to humble yourself and say, I need help, and do that work. I don't know how many times Anna Marie and I have encouraged people who are here with full blast diseases to divorce the person they're with, because we know that's why the cancer is there. We know that's why they've had 2 heart attacks. We know that's why they're eating nothing but potato chips and ice cream, and they have diabetes. If they don't take that obstacle that crushes the imagination, takes hope away, takes power away from a person, they're going to manifest their own death, their own suicide, through creating biological disease.
I can tell you you're absolutely right. I think I've done probably around 26,000 emotional consultations, and you hit it right on the head. I will do the same thing. Divorce is not a disease. Divorce is something that can actually help you get rid of the disease. And you know what? Everybody out there that's watching this, you know what? You're either the family curse or you're the family blessing, but you're never going to become the family blessing unless you become the blessing to yourself, and you take and you observe really well what's going on in your own mind. It's really so important, and people don't do that. But Brian and Anna, as well as I do, that 25 years ago, that if somebody said that they were going to see a whole life coach or an emotional counselor, then everybody would thought that that person needed a straitjacket. And that was another lie that was put out there. And the thing is that if you don't heal yourself emotionally, then you'll never heal yourself physically, and you'll always be a terrorist to yourself and your family. So, Brian, I know that you stated this, that women are having more dementia than men. Can you tell me why?
I'm going to let Anna answer that. She's a better woman than me.
Yeah, so dementia, I mean, we have much more of that problem. And women are often caregivers. And often when you're a caregiver, you don't take care of yourself. You lose yourself. I meet so many women here at the Institute, and they tell me they don't eat well now. They just snack, and they don't sleep well, and they don't exercise. So you kind of inundated in caregiving. That's one reason. And then another one is because a lot of women are depressed and they take antidepressants. Now listen to this. If you take antidepressant, it's a 70% greater risk for you to get dementia and Alzheimer. This is nuts. So lifestyle has so much to do with your change. And of course, hormones have a lot to do with this. We get hormones through our food, through our exercise, through being happy and being content with what you have created. And if you feel like you haven't been able to create, start creating. Create a life that you always wanted. Because sometimes you feel like you're stuck, especially in caregiving, and you need to ask for help. You're not the only show in town. And a lot of people feel guilty for that. But then when they finally ask for help, boy, they are so relieved.
It's like a waterfall.
Yeah, it's like a waterfall, and you start taking care. So a lot of women come here, and a lot of women could be heading. So it's definitely has to do with hormones. It has to do with being malnourished. Like I would tell you, you better get on B12, get your vitamin D, get shots of B12 and vitamin D. Make sure we have a product called Conscious Brain. People come back to life with this. It's amazing. And and start to exercise, because boy, that gets your brain going.
50% of the people that have light to moderate depression eliminate it just through aerobic exercise. That's a data, that's statistic, by the way. I mean, I'm not talking about schizophrenia or deep bipolar disorder, but light to moderate, just exercise alone. You know that, Dr. Wolfe.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And yes, I do. I understand that. And, if I can say something about caregivers, and, it seems to be a discussion that's getting more popular and more popular because people are getting sicker and sicker, and they're getting sicker earlier on in life. And so one person has to look after the other, especially when it comes to couples. But the other thing, too, is I think that we actually have to help the caregiver to know that it's okay to love yourself and care for yourself, because caregivers are actually programmed that way. And I think that we're raised this way, believing that we use the outside world to fill up our heart every day. And you know what? Love is like oxygen. We can't live without it. So if you've never taught that it's a self-serve job and that you got to fill up your own tank to feel tankful, then if you rely on your wife, your husband, your children, the dog, the outside world to give you love, and if they don't show up today and they don't show up tomorrow, then what happens? Well, then that is called depression. So let's talk about something else. Why do you think women are overlooked when it comes to research on their health?
So why is there so little research done on women?
Oh, my gosh.
The data on this is shocking.
That is shocking. So, so now we realize that all the research until very recently, actually Canada started to research with women.
Canada's ahead on this.
Yes, it's ahead, and was all male. Even the mice was male. So they didn't want any female hormones to disturb the process. This is crazy. So imagine you're taking heart medication and it's only tested for men. Imagine you could die on the same dose with this totally different dose that we should be on. So no, it was purely practical for them to not include women.
So it saved an enormous amount, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars over hundreds of years, I'm sure. They only used male subjects and male animals. And the reason being is they didn't want the interference of the gyrating hormones that females have in it. So all of the prescriptions that are standardized for women on all of the pharmaceutical are skewed.
Yeah.
It would literally take, this is out of the mouth of one of the most prestigious medical journals, billions of dollars and 50 years to correct the problem. Well, I will say, and I'm going to give your country accolades,
Yes.
the very first country, after we've known this for 10 to 15 years now, that stood up and said, we're going to start to correct the problem. Yes, it's going to take time, it's going to take money, but at least in the future, if women choose to take pharmaceutical drugs, which isn't always the first choice, but at times a necessary choice, at least we're going to know what works for them. Like heart attacks and strokes, they could test a woman today
And be totally fine.
Totally fine. They'd say, the doctor would say, you're the healthiest specimen we've seen in a year. She could walk out and have a massive coronary in 2 days. The reason being that women have heart attacks in small vessels, not large veins like we do. They're not testing small vessel disease. They're testing large vein disease. So even the diagnostic end of this is a fraud. It's outrageous.
It's for men.
Yeah, I think it's always been for men, right? I mean, the word man and men is in most of the major words. And we know, we're not going to get into this today, but it started thousands of years ago where men took away the power from women. Actually, I've been working on something with my partner, and it's called I Am Woman. And we're actually doing a master class that we're going to release in about 2 to 3 months called I Am Woman. And we actually show the history of how we basically took the power away from women. And I think that men are just totally jealous of women. They live longer, and in a lot of ways, they're mentally and physically stronger. And we can't have that. So let me ask you a question, another question. What is quantum human biology?
Well, of course, we're going to give a course on that you'll be able to hear. But when I started to realize that the body was like the universe, the multiple universe, every cell reflected a planet. And if you went deeper than the cell, it was energy. Just like the core of the planet Earth is this hot, molten lava. And when you start to look at this, you start to peel away the facade of biology. You start to realize it's an energetic body that we're dealing with. So when I started to come up with these thoughts in the 1970s, I started to read books. There weren't too many at that point, and some of them were not so good, to be candid with you. I ran into a woman called Dr. Valerie Hunt, who at the time was a professor at the University of California, Los Angeles. And I eventually befriended her. She befriended me and became one of my mentors. And she was back in the 1940s and 50s speaking about how the energetic body had to be dealt with in medicine, that we keep treating chemistry, and it's like trying to treat a toe by touching the nose. It had nothing to do with what we were trying to deeply get into. And her class was the most sought after class in the history of UCLA. Kids that were just getting into UCLA in their freshman year dreamed they could get into her class by senior year. So we began, as a matter of fact, one of the books I'm currently writing is called Quantum Human Biology. We began to write that together a few years ago. She's now passed on. She passed on at 98, and I was a little discouraged because when I would come up with a concept, she was very polite and nice. She'd say, that's great, but let's look at it this way. So I felt I would lost that mentoring, but in a way, she or somehow other people came into my life, and I started to understand that this is a new science. It's the science, the future science of healthcare, the future science of medicine. It's something we've been employing since 1980 when Anna Marie and I became directors at Hippocrates. So this is our 40th anniversary as directors of Hippocrates and our 50th and 47th year working in the field. And we've been employing in our energy medicine department the state of the art. Now, we spent a lot of time in Europe, of course. Anna Marie is Swedish, and the Russians really head the way. Germans come in second. So we use everything from Biofor here to Cyberscan to BioWell to Undermed. You know, the list, we have 17 technologies we use. And when you employ these technologies on either healthy people like us, it just energizes you at a level that's amazing. It slows cell death down. It stimulates immunity like nothing in the world other than the sun stimulates immunity. And when you use it on people that are sick, remember, we were doing this work before the energy medicine department and after it. The results are spectacular. The difference is night and day. I mean, I don't know how many people didn't make it because we didn't have those technologies available or they weren't developed at that point. But the reality is that, like it or not, we're going to have to make way for all of this. The problem is, once you get one of these units, they're going to work forever. Just like a Model A car still drives. Now, you may want a Tesla. Yes, there's newer versions of it, but it will always work. And that's not a good model for the pharmaceutical model. You run out of bottle, you have to get a bottle. This one you keep using and using, you can pass down. Upon your death at 120, you can pass it down to your child, who passes it down to the grandchild. Because the circuitry of the human body, the genius of the universe, the way that you're interconnected with every single energetic particle in the multiple universes is what we have to deal with. And when you do that, and you reach that scientifically validated pattern of mathematics, there's nothing you can't do to bring people back to full energy and life.
Well, you hit it right on the head. I mean, Einstein said that energy medicine was going to be our future, and I really think he was just talking about that we'd actually wake up and realize that we are electromagnetic light energy beings. And for those of you out there, I mean, it's the most common sense thing in the world. I mean, everything you eat, everything you drink leaves the body. The only thing that stays behind is the frequency. And your emotions are energy in motion. So every thought you have, it dictates a frequency. So by actually using energy medicine equipment, you know, it is the leading force, you know, and you said it right on the head. Yes, we need nutrition. That's obvious. We're physical beings. But first and foremost, we're light energy beings. And if we get the right energy medicine equipment and we're able to use that, then we're just going to fill up our battery, because that's what we are. We're walking, talking, electromagnetic batteries. And if we know how to do that and supercharge ourselves, and you know, the funniest thing, Brian and Anna, is that, you know, the medical system refuses to look at the energetic body, but at the same time, they use energetic equipment like x-rays, ultrasound, and what are all of these things doing? They're testing the electromagnetic light energy body to see what's physically wrong. So, you know, that's where the hypocrite comes in. The Hippocratic oath turned into the hypocrite, because you know what? It's all about pharmaceuticals, and everybody better get this, that soon as you start feeding the spirit, soon as you start understanding that you are a light energy body and you head in that direction, then you will so be blessed. So I want to thank you, Brian and Anna, for really giving an interview today that really puts everything into perspective. This is probably one of the best interviews I've done with anyone in a long time. And that's why I've always highly respected everything that you guys are doing. And you're so much appreciated around the world. For those people who don't even get to come to you, but they get to get your information.
Well, thank you so much,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Wolfe.
Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for doing this. And thank Brian, who organized this conference. He's one of the great people I know. You know, we sort of have a love fest going on here. We mutually enjoy this conversation with you. We know we do dozens and dozens of interviews every year, and quite often they have a hard time learning what questions to ask or asking them in intelligible ways. You've done great. You've added your part to it, and we symbiotically together hopefully enhance the lives of people listening to us today. God bless you. Keep up your work. Let's work together and raise ourselves beyond insanity and get to a point where we're all flourishing, thriving, and passionately living. Be well.
Thank you so much, and bless the two of you. And just know this, that you have a free pass anytime you want to come on the Doc of Detox show and you feel that you would like to share, because I'm sure everybody wants what you've got to give, and I know I do. So everybody, don't forget, everyone, every Monday you can join me for the Doc Talk Live Q&A, where I will answer all your questions live from YouTube, Facebook, and Intercom. When watching on YouTube, don't forget that to subscribe below and make sure you click the bell, and understand something, that all our shows are time-stamped. Yes, today's show is time-stamped. So you'll be able to go along to that certain topic that Brian and Anna brought up, that you'll just want to go back and say, what did they say? Because there's a lot of gold nuggets in this show today. So just go to YouTube and you'll see it's all time-stamped. Also, if you wish to listen to any of our shows, if you want to listen to the audio version, you can go to iTunes, Spotify, and SoundCloud. Again, I want to thank Brian and Anna and all my listeners who make this show possible. And understand something. If you want to listen to Brian and Anna's lectures, and there's going to be about another 10 world-leading lecturers coming on the Legends Conference, then please go to my events page and check it out, and you'll see all the lectures there. And we have tickets on for $97, and this is a 9-day event, okay? So God bless everyone, and don't forget, take your power back, but stop giving it away. That's the first thing. And we're here to help and show you how to do that. God bless, and remember something. 3, 2, 1, you got this. If you're looking for life-saving and life-changing information, well, you've come to the right place. Don't forget to click and subscribe. Stay connected.